Good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to welcome each one of you and our Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Ruth Manorama, and the speaker of today's lecture, Ms. Abhirami Jyotishwaran. I am very glad to welcome all of you here to the Prajanya Equality Colloquium series and also for your decision to spend your evening here. I assure you, our speakers will definitely make your evening wonderful and thought provoking. There is no doubt in that. Before we go into the program, I just want to say a few words about the Prajanya Equality Colloquium series, which starts today. So you will be having the question in your mind, like what is the need of this series?
That's all.
So we have background for this. So the violence in the name of caste and gender, such as honor killings, increases day by day in India. We believe that discussion of gender issues without discussing caste or discussion of caste issues without a gender lens are definitely incomplete. There have been many discussion on gender and caste and gender violence several times in our programs, but then we realize there is a need to talk about the issue around caste and gender very systematically. That's why we came up with this series. And every year, you all know, Prajanya conducts several programs during our 16 days campaign against gender violence. During the last year campaign, we had a panel discussion on caste and gender violence. And all the panelists shared the opinion that there is not enough time was not given to them to speak about the issue in depth. So we thought like it is necessary to focus on the topic with a different approach and through which we should provide the platform to discuss and reflect, learn, unlearn around the issue. So we should provide some platform for this separately. That's what we thought. Thus born this series, Prajanya Equality Colloquium series. So we decided to choose the month of April to commemorate the birth anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar, who tirelessly worked to annihilate the caste. So we pleased to curate this lecture series with 2 English and 2 Tamil lectures on different dimensions of caste and gender. We hope to make this an annual April activity with all of your support. And yeah, so with this note, I invite Dr. Swarna Rajagopalan, our founder and managing trustee, to introduce our special guest, Dr. Ruth Manorama.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you all for coming. I am more than delighted to see your faces here. Some of you are coming for the first time. Initially when Sudhir and I talked about the program flow, I said, Sudhir, it's your show, you do everything. But then I said, let me introduce Dr. Ruth. So I am selfishly taking the prerogative of introducing the special guest for our first. We are not a very ceremonial organization. We don't do stages and ponades and so on. But this is really special to us because I feel like with the energy of somebody like Dr. Ruth Manorama starting the series off, surely we will come back here every year. I feel much more optimistic than when we were initially brainstorming, when it was just a hope. So let me introduce the person who doesn't need an introduction. Dr. Ruth Manorama, a feminist activist involved in educating, organizing, and mobilizing women, Dalits, urban poor, and unorganized sector workers over 3 decades, from the grassroots to the national levels in India and beyond, who has held key positions in several women's groups like the National Alliance for Women, the National Federation of Dalit Women, the National Center for Labor, Confederation of Unorganized Sector Unions and Human Rights Organizations in the country and outside. She has built wide networks with women's organizations trade unions, and various social movements in the country. She sees the interconnectedness between all these issues and the common cause of marginalized people around the world. Um, she is also well known to all of us as the winner of the Alternative Nobel. She's participated as a delegate as well as resource person in several Asian, global, and UN conferences from 1979 onwards on issues pertaining to women, health, peace, labor, indigenous peoples, racism, and Dalits, environment, and human rights. Through CEDAW, CERD, the Human Rights Commission, and the person who wrote this bio has added etc., etc., unable to capture in a single introduction all the things she has done without taking away from her time to speak. So I also want to use this moment to apologize to Dr. Ruth because the first set of graphics I sent her did not mention her, but we wrote about her in every single promo for the program. And we welcome her here with gratitude, with appreciation of her work, and with a lot of love. So, Dr. Ruth, over to you. Wish us well and see us on our way. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay. Good evening to everyone. I bring solidarity greetings from the National Federation of Dalit Women to the Pragna Equality Colloquium. And thank you for inviting me to say a few words to launch the start of the webinar series on caste and gender. Thank you, Swarna, for having this introduction. It sounds very familiar to me. And people writes about me everywhere, but I think that it's so important to discuss a subject like gender and caste. We are so happy that caste and gender has been brought to the centrality of the feminist movement by the Dalit women themselves. I wanted to say that. In 90s, our work in 80s and 90s brought certain understanding. There is some hollowness in talking about feminism in India, in the feminist movement. There is something missing. I think, when we talk about caste, it doesn't mean caste, being a big problem for the Dalit women. Yeah. But I think that it's really a problem for all women. When I wrote a paper called The Downtrodden Among the Downtrodden, Dalit Women, the downtrodden among the downtrodden in 1980s. And women told me, Ruth, you are not only the downtrodden among the downtrodden, we are also. But I said something quite, unique in our case and different in our case, which I will, also talk about it. At the outset, I may not be able to say everything. I've fallen, fallen from talking for 45 minutes because I did not tell Surarali that I'm going to talk, in this meeting, because I'm very honest that I've been so much involved in the month of Jan, February, March. I couldn't even breathe, despite my pain in the knees and many other things. And the previous year, completely, I was involved in Corona relief work. And I saw the marginalization of the Dalit women, Dalit people. The most of the migrant workers are also, the Dalit people in large number. Anyway, we will go into the subject now. At the outset, I would like to say that women are not homogeneous group, but we come from a diverse backgrounds of caste and class. We are all women, yes, our features look the same, but we are, from different and diverse background. According to our social locations, They are differently that we are impacted by various social forces and dynamics. Through my work in 70s onwards, like I entered into doing activism from my student days, that is about like when I was 23, 24. So 70s onwards, 80s and 90s, I come to understand that Dalit women in rural as well in urban areas face in their everyday life a unique and systemic deprivation and discrimination. Not only the immediate private actors like the landlords in the villages, the dominant caste, men, women, and youth. Do you know, like when I worked in the villages, even the children from the the dominant caste, they have so much pride, arrogance, in their bodies and in their language, even to the elder people. The rich, high-class neighborhood in the cities, I would call them, the private actors, but also the state machineries, the panchayat, police, courts, and departments dealing with justice and welfare, measures for the Dalit. I conceptualize that Dalit women are the downtrodden among the downtrodden, and they are discriminated by the caste, class, gender, which results in intergenerational poverty. Poverty is not today because that there is a lockout of Corona season, but that is an intergenerational poverty. People are not able to come out of their poverty, and intersectional marginalizations. Dalit women in India constitute 16.23% of total population of India, and Dalit women numbering 49.96% of the total Dalit, the scheduled caste population. I have realized that discrimination and the deprivation that the Dalit women face is unique and systemic. Therefore, I have conceptualized that the Dalit women are thrice discriminated and alienated on the basis of caste, class, and gender. Because of this intersecting nature and form of marginalization they suffer. In the early, 2000, in the early 2000, at an UN meeting at Zagreb, Croatia, Kimberly Crenshaw and I were invited to speak on the intersectional impact on Blacks and Dalits. Black and Dalit women respectively. As you all may know, my friend Kimberly Crenshaw was the one who have conceptualized the intersectional theory, drawing from the experiences of discrimination faced by Black women of their race and gender. In the case of Dalit women, they face triple alienation owing to their status of being at the bottom of class, caste, and gender hierarchies. Therefore, our experiences of marginalization are similar because they are historical. Our sufferings are historical discrimination, structural and systemic in nature and forms. For example, when we look at the sexual violence on Dalit women, it shows a pattern of impunity enjoyed by state and non-state perpetrators. There is complete normalization of violence against Dalit women. The whole world will arise when there is violence against any woman, but it's so normalized. I'll tell you an example. In a recent example that Nodeep Kaur from Punjab, a young Dalit trade unionist, when she was arrested, she was told that she as a Dalit woman has no right to engage in activism and speak up for the labor cause. She was tortured and assaulted in police custody. My sisters, my learned sisters will bring in, all those aspects in their papers when they're talking about sexual violence. I don't want to go in detail. The marginalization of Dalit women's status reflects in all aspects of life, across all fields, including socio-economic and political institutions. It's so sad. Sometimes, even in the progressive social movements, we see, the caste discrimination and consider them as, there is nothing in their head, and they are only good for doing manual work, scavenging, burying the dead. I mean, the kind of status that, the caste brings to women, they have status, they have opportunities. But the Dalit women are, for ages, historically denied that. I wanted to say, even today, this discrimination is very largely present in the feminist movement, though they are challenged by the Dalit sisters. In spite of all these things, you may say, did Dalit women movement is not there? Have they really lost themselves? I wanted to say, Dalit women have a long history of struggles, which is untold. It is not written very much. Their struggles against patriarchy, casteism, and capitalism. I would even say the neo-capitalism. Their struggles began with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. We have been very fondly remembering him throughout this month. They were with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar during the anti-untouchability movements. While the Dalit women and the Dalit communities were participating in the freedom movement, don't forget, they were also fighting against, the caste and untouchability. They called the movement as anti-untouchability movement. This is in 1914 onwards, 1920s and on. Today, I want to center stage. The Dalit feminism, I wanted to also quote, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had said, the measures, he will measure, or he measures the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. It's not just say, okay, our India is shining, our India is growing, our GDP growth is, little, that is need to be questioned now. But the progress, he measures the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. So I wanted to say that women were there in the movement fighting against patriarchy and, capitalism. I want to now bring and center stage the Dalit feminism is not only against caste and untouchability. Dalit feminism is anti-class. We are against poor. We are against people who are impoverished. What is the reason, the rationality behind, poverty? The amazing of wealth today. And anti-gender superiority. Sometimes I will also call gender imperialism. Therefore, Dalit feminism is inclusive, intersectional. It envisions a gender-just society because your colloquium is called equality. I would say Dalit feminism is inclusive. It doesn't alienate anybody. It should not alienate anybody. It is intersectional. It will look at issues comprehensively, not gender alone. It is also rooted in social justice and equity. Now, if you read the preamble of the Constitution, you will see the values that has been written in our Constitution. Therefore, I call upon all sisters in the feminist movement to be strategic allies in the emancipatory process or the emancipatory agenda of, women's emancipation, that all historically marginalized women in the country. I'm giving a call for all the feminists. The Equity Colloquium would bring in, through our understanding, through our life experiences, from our struggle, that we are not suffering in pain. We are wanting to transform our pain into power. There's one of the slogans that which I gave myself in the conference in Beijing, in the international conference in Beijing in 1995. So in the emancipatory process, that all sisters from the feminist movement and from the progressive social movements, that you would stand and join in the process of all historically marginalized women in the country. So we have nothing to lose but our chains, my sisters. I hope that my time is up. If not, I can speak more. But I think that I will not be able to speak in 15 minutes all that either in my brain or in my heart or my experiences or my notes. But I'm leaving to my, sisters who are, going to be, they are extremely, involved in the recent issues and the recent struggles, and they are young women. So Abhirami, Divya Bharati, Shalini, and similar, and also the sister who is organizing this. Is she Sudaroli or?
Sudaroli.
Yes, Sudaroli. And also Swarna. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope and wish all the best for, that our struggle is not for wealth, it's not for status, it's for reclamation of the society and humanity which has been lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for making this extra special by coming and speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Swarna. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our request and being here and give such a brief. And this was the boost for us, to continue this work. So thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, actually, we are into the program now. So before introducing the speaker, I just want to inform you that the lecture will be for 45 minutes, followed with question and answer session for half an hour. I request the participant to enter your questions now and then in the chat. The speaker will answer your questions at the end of the session. So with that note, I want to introduce the speaker of the first lecture of the series, Ms. Abhirami Jyothishwaran. Ms. Abhirami Jyothishwaran has been associated with the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, New Delhi, India, since December 2005. Presently, Ms. Abhirami Jyothishwaran has been serving as the General Secretary of All India Dalit Mahila Adhikar Manch, NCDHR, New Delhi. She herself hails from Dalit community, very actively involved and committed towards the empowerment of Dalit community. Abhirami is a postgraduate in computer science from University of Madras. Currently, she is pursuing her final year law degree. Placing her in the organization, her primary responsibility is to plan, monitor, and execute programs related to promotion of Dalit women leadership and addressing violence against Dalit women and minor girls in 7 states across the country. At the international level, Abhirami Jyotishwaran participated in World Social Forum 2007 held in Nairobi, Kenya, and South Africa in 2007 to raise the Dalit concern in the forums. She raised her concern on the police atrocities committed against Dalits and Dalit women in the 18th European Union NGO Human Rights Forum 2016, Brussels. Abhirami Jyotishwaran actively raised the issues related to violence against Dalit women and the impunity subsides in India in the 41st UN Human Rights Council at Geneva in the month of July 2019. Under her leadership, All India Dalit Mahila Adhikar Manch recently published a status report 2021 called Dalit Women Rise for Justice, with the confidence that the report will be useful for the government while taking steps to improve Dalit women's conditions in India through effective implementation of the existing acts and policies. So much privilege. We are so much privileged to have you here as a speaker, ma'am. Here I invite Ms. Abhirami Jyotishwaran to deliver a lecture on Do Dalit Women Matter? Equality, Human Rights and Caste. Over to you, Ms. Abhirami Jyotishwaran.
Jaiveer, thank you for inviting me for this lecture. I'm very much happy to be part of it. And I also thank my senior Ruth Manorama ma'am as a part of this session because she was one of the inspiration. So for being a fighter to become an activist, so it's my pleasure to present this session in front of her and along with you. My thing, Do Dalit Women Matter? Equality, Human Rights and Caste. As Ruth Ji has already informed, Dalit women form the triple oppression due to caste, class and gender. And we all know Dalit women constitute 9.79 crore. It's equivalent to 10 crore of Indian population, which is equivalent to 8% of total Indian population. That means it's not a minimal number. So more than 10 crore of Dalit women are across the country. So what is the thing? Why we are speaking about caste and gender? What makes us to think about the caste and gender? Everybody know about the patriarchy. It's not a new thing. Everyone knows what is patriarchy, what is the center of purity. Purity of women. Women is considered as the object. So it is also similar to Dalit women. Even Dalit women, the things considered as the purity and also the object of the Dalits. But I would like to say there are differences between the patriarchy, between the dominant caste women as well as the Dalit women. The patriarchy can't be seen as general for all Indian women. Because when we see patriarchy, the Dalit women are oppressed due to Brahmanical patriarchy. That is where we differ from. The caste and patriarchy plays a critical role of the oppression of Dalit women. So the things, if you see on day-to-day basis, the Dalit women, it exploits the Dalit women due to her caste and gender. If you see the Brahmanical patriarchy divides, creates hierarchy among women, non-Dalit women and Dalit women. If you see this, even if there is any, what we can say, if there is any manifestation of patriarchy for Dalit women is not just based on gender, but on the caste. if there is any relation that is between what is the association of Dalit women and non-Dalit women, it is most on caste, not based on gender. So when we see if there is anything, if I can see if there is it is not based on gender. If I see I'm a woman, I'm a Dalit woman and she is a non-Dalit woman, the things doesn't comes because of the gender. More than the gender, the caste plays a critical role. So the women, though they are dominant caste, they gives more association to the dominant caste women compared to Dalit women. So these are the things how we are looking into the Brahminical patriarchy, how it affects, how it hierarchically divides among the women. So coming to the function of Brahminical patriarchy, what does the Brahminical patriarchy does? We see it plays a critical role to keep the women at the bottom of each and everything, even compared to the men. Dalit women are most affected. We know the Devadasi system, how many Dalit women are involved in it. More than 90% of the women who are involved in Devadasi are Dalit women. If it comes to the manual scavenging, we know more than 95% of the women who are involved in such a manual scavenging are Dalit women. If you take even the bonded labor system, I would like to say only a thing where is Sumangali schemes in the textile mills, mainly in Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore, in that areas. If you see, more than 60% of the women, girls, on the pretext of getting money for the dowry, they have been forced in that kind of 3 years of job, like that, in a bonded labor kind of thing. So if you see those kind of women, those also, see, more than 60% of the women are Dalit women. So this is how, even if you see, if it is not only a gender issue, it's a caste and gender issue, we can see very clearly. It's not that dominant caste women are involved in bonded labor much. It is not the dominant caste women involved in manual scavenging much. It is not the dominant caste women involved in Devadasi much. So this says how the Dalit women are oppressed because of Brahminical patriarchy, how they are forced. Compared to Dalit women, they are at the bottom of the hierarchy. So coming to that, this is not, we can't, coming to the socio-economic condition. Now we released a book, Dalit Women Rise for Justice, which mostly has the government data. So what it says the education is now, definitely there is no doubt that we are rising. When Ruth ma'am was there, may not be this much of Dalit women are there. There are very few, but now that you can see,
Abhirami, your connection is frozen. So
is it okay now?
Yes, unmute.
So when we see the socio-economic political situation, I would like to say education, 99% of enrollment in the primary schools. It's a good sign. We are raising, we are getting education. But when it comes to the higher education, it is just 15% of the Dalit girls are in higher education. So what is the thing? Why when they are enrolling 99%, it's a good sign. We could able to see the rise. But when it comes to the higher education, it is just 15%. So this is how we feel. In between, the dropout rates are high, discrimination are there, accessing the education we are trying, but there are various forms of violences, discrimination in between, and the structural problems are there. So finally, if you see, only 15% of the women are getting higher education. It is the same case when you see the employment, the Dalit women employment rates are more. It's because of their poverty, we have to say 24% of Dalit women are employed, where when we see the other women, only 18% of the women are employed at the compared to dominant caste. So this is how we are seeing. And also when people speak of laborers, mostly the laborers or who represent the labor community, they speak women laborers are more concerned. But when we see the data, it's Dalit women laborers are more than 3% than the non-Dalit women laborers. So they form 3 times is such a huge amount. So the whoever the laborers that they are representing, they have to consider the caste as one of the dominant thing in their arguments and concerns. It's not, you can't say gender and class. The caste plays a critical role. This is as per the government data. So we can see how the Dalit women are as a laborers, they have been employed. And also we know Dalit women are more in agriculture laborers on day-to-day basis compared to non-Dalit women. So this says how they happen. And coming to the land ownership, there is Dalit constitute 11.84% of holding land. In that, if you see as a Dalit women, it is just 2,000 women. Only 2,000 number of Dalit women are holding the land, the agriculture land. So we can see the difference, how much of non-Dalits are, 79% of non-Dalits are holding the land. So we can see the power, the land is one of the power. Land ownership.
I think you're
You were speaking of land ownership when you got cut off.
yeah, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, fine. Yeah, coming to the political representation, it is 12 Dalit women are in the Lok Sabha compared to total 78 women. So these are some of the issues. And when you see in Rajya Sabha, not even 1% of Dalit women is there. Even we know if Lok Sabha, it is on election process and other kind of things. But in the Rajya Sabha, it is a nomination. Even no one is ready to nominate a Dalit woman, at least a 1% of the in Rajya Sabha. It clearly shows how the caste plays and where is the women, Dalit women in this political representation and the power dynamics. So this is also one of the factors where I would like to say my mainly focus on human rights, equality and caste. When we see, we all aware the constitution which abolished untouchability in the constitution, but even after 73 years of independence and other thing, we are still facing various kind of untouchability and atrocities. So focusing this, I have 3-4 slides I would like to share with you so that it gives a clarity of what the NCRB data says. Is it visible? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I would like to say some of the nature of caste and gender-based violence against Dalit women, which we have taken into consideration in our status report. So last 2 years data we have consolidated. So these are the cases where we intervened. It's not like that only in the newspaper. It's where our people are, as we are working in more than 7 states, mainly on the northern states, we are part of it. And these are the cases where we addressed. Like Dalit minor girl murdered as a retaliation over the land dispute. It is in Madhya Pradesh, Raisan district. It happened in the month of June 2020. Dalit women beaten and abused by 27 dominant caste men over drinking water. This is Aurangabad district, Bihar. It happened in March 2020. Dalit women gang raped in retaliation to the complaint that she has made against the accused men in some other matter. Video of the act shot and circulated. This happened in Alwar district, Rajasthan, April 2019. Dalit women branded as witch over death of a minor girl, forced her to eat human excreta, East Champaran district, Bihar. This happened in October 2019. Dalit groom assaulted for riding horse in the marriage procession. 15 families socially boycotted. Ujjain, Madhya Pradesh, May 2019. An entire community attacked by mob for organizing Dalit religious festival. On Buddha, on the name of Buddha, they organized. So this happened in Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. In the mass attack, more than 26 women has been assaulted in the mob. Coming to that COVID situation, we all know how COVID affected each and everyone. Even during that situation, Dalit women was beaten up, denied ration distribution amid COVID pandemic. This happened in Saharanpur, UP, April 2020. So these are some of the cases I would like to say. There are huge number of cases. You can see the various forms of physical violences. It is murder. Why? It is due to land dispute. When they assert the right to land, Dalit women are murdered. When they assert the right to drinking water, they have been beaten and abused by 25 dominant caste men. It's not 1 or 2, it's a 25, you can imagine. And Dalit women gang raped when we tried to assert her right to recourse, legal recourse. When she wanted to go for legal recourse, she has been gang raped, and it has circulated in the video and other things that happened in Rajasthan. And Dalit women branded as witchcraft, and forced her to eat human excreta. And Dalit groom riding horse, and for that they have been made a social boycotted. And religious festival and the COVID. So we can see how the untouchability and when we assert our rights against these practices, how the women are targeted, how the women body are targeted. Dalit women are facing up. It is a form of oppression. When we see this even for drinking water, even after 70 years of independence, it's still what kind of, we are speaking about our independence. Whose independence we got it? For whom it is? Even now, we are unable to fetch water freely from the common tap. In order to suppress the atrocities, violence, most of the villages, Dalit hamlet has their own water tap. But whenever there is no water from the tap, they try to access the dominant caste, or which is common. It's not dominant caste, it is common for that village. They face atrocity, they face violences during those periods. So we can see what kind of, all the incidents which I quoted are from 2019 or 20. It's not a previous thing. So we can see even witchcraft practice, making them to eat human excreta. We know very well there are various laws to protect and promote Dalit human rights. But still, why this kind of things are happening? And our Article 17 The constitution has abolished untouchability. Then why we are unable to fetch water even today? So these are some of the questions that we have to see as a thing compared to, and who are mostly affected, who are going to fetch water from the public tap, the Dalit women. So we can see how they have been treated even today in order to suppress the voice of the Dalit community. They have been treated, they have been used an object to oppress, to suppress the voice of the Dalit community, to create a fear. Definitely, we are saying it's a transition period for us to assert our rights. Definitely, I'm saying before, if you see 25 years, definitely no one will have dared to go and fetch water from a common tap or ride a horse. But now we are trying to assert our rights, to do our cultural freedom, to assert our rights. But this time, in order to maintain the status quo, there are various types of oppression is conducted on us. That is the forms of atrocity we are saying on various reasons. So these are some of the glimpse of atrocities cases that we monitored. Would like to share the NCRB data analysis. 2014 and 19 is a government data, we all know. As per the NCRB, National Crime Record Bureau, 2019, 10 Dalit women and girls are raped every day. Every day, the government says every day it happens, 10 Dalit women are raped. We know how it is difficult for a Dalit woman to register a case even today. Even we done a protest in the month of May 2020 for registering a complaint. We all know that the May had the COVID period, 2020. Even that period, we all covered our mask, we were wearing masks, and we stood in front of the police station to register a complaint. It's a first step of access to justice. We are asking to register the complaint, to file a registration of FIR, first information report. But even for registering it, we have to do dharna in front of the police station, even during the COVID period. So this is the status. In that background, if you see that 10 Dalit women girls are raped every day as per the government data, we can know what is the reality. It is a tip of the iceberg. We would like to say it's a tip of the iceberg. In reality, there are so many areas where the cases are not reported, either underreported. These are the things in reality. We say that consistent year-on-year increase is recorded with overall increase of 45.9% in 6 years. There is an increase. 45.9% of the are increasing. So what is the thing, why it is like, if you see in the year 2014, it is 5,149, and in the year 2019, 7,510. These are the cases registered under SC/ST Act. I'm speaking about SC/ST Act data. So even the rape cases, 56.11% of the rape has been increased registration. Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh are the respective top the list of incidents where the violences happened in the year 2014 to 19. So these gives a violence against Dalit women, how it has happened. During this report, we also see that how all crimes against all women, what is the increase? Like generally under IPC, we can say just 2% of the cases has been increased. We really take into consideration, even no violence should happen against any woman, either it's a Dalit woman or a non-Dalit woman. It should be a atrocity-free country. Against it should speak about gender justice. But when we are seeing the rates of Dalit women are increasing, we have to take into a serious consideration of it. So coming to barriers in accessing justice, we all know we have seen how many cases are increasing, but when we see what are the barriers in accessing justice, I would like to mention about the recent Hathras case. We all know Without now, today, we can't speak, without speaking Hathras case, we can't represent any Dalit women because it has shook the nation. When we see the brutal attack, gang rape and murder of a Dalit girl, we have seen that in this month of September, Uttar Pradesh. Everybody knows, despite her family objection, district magistrate cremated her body in the midnight without the presence of the family members. When under 164 statement to the magistrate, the girl repeatedly mentioned the 4 people name, accused them as gang raping her. Yet, the DM and the DGP denied that, citing forensic report that found no presence of sperm. The police denied the allegation. It's a clear violation of Amendment Act 2013, Criminal Justice Administration Act, CRPC, which is cites presence of sperm or semen in the body of the rape victim is immaterial. It clearly says. But even though these people want to dilute this thing, saying it is not a rape, even 100 of members from the dominant caste community staged a protest in support of the men of the gang rape. We all aware. The people from nearby village also attended the so-called Mahapanchayat. It happened. Mahapanchayat in that area, it happened. The district administration sealed the village of the gang rape victim to prevent journalists from entering the village and meeting the family. The officials have also reportedly seized the phone of the victims and put them under surveillance. So we can see what are the things, how it is happening. We know the district administration, which has to protect, promote the justice for Dalit and Dalit women, how they are making the things, cremating the body without the concern of the family members. And they know that there is a act says that sperm and things is not necessary. But even though they are saying it is not a rape, and also creating pressure for the victims by organizing the Takus community or the dominant caste community are organizing protest, Mahapanchayat, and the police also were preventing other journalists to enter the village. So these kind of things we can think, what is the justice delivery system today? When we speak about human rights, equality, where we are. Owing to the public pressure, it is due to the public pressure and constant media attention. Because this is one of the case where it has been very taken by the nation. The state administration called it for an investigation by the CBI. Finally, it has been handed over to the CBI and the DM has been transferred. Though we all very well know under the SC/ST Act, if there is any willful negligence by the police officer, they have to be booked under Section 4 of the SC/ST Act. If they are not doing the duty, the SC/ST Act can be invoked against the government officials. But in this case, the DM, even after having a stringent act, the DM has been transferred. This is the system that we are all in. And CBI filed its charge sheet under the SC/ST Act and 376. It said it's a gang rape. It's under SC/ST Act. It's a caste-based violence. CBI filed its charge sheet. Even after the charge sheet filing, when the victims wanted to go to the court to give his evidence, a large mob, including lawyers, gathered inside the courtroom in order to threaten and intimidate the complainant and the counsel. So the counsel is now trying to transfer the case of trial from district Hathras to somewhere within the state. So these are, we can see after how a Dalit, it's a difficult for everybody to, from the registration of FIR till we are getting justice. Though the case has been transferred to CBI, there was a lot of pressure, international pressure from various human rights institutions. Because of this, it has led to such a, at least the filing of charge sheet has been done under SC/ST Act. It has been said that the victim has been raped. And even when the trial started, there was lots of pressure inside the courtroom also for the victim not to give their evidence properly. So these are the methods how the people have been treated, what are the things that they are facing. So this is just a glimpse as a one incident which I recently has talked about. I have just presented the situation. So when you see the overall court disposal, the conviction rate for 6 years from 2014 to 19 is 29.15%. Only 29% of the cases are getting convicted, where the pendency rate is 88.48 of the cases which are registered under SC/ST Act. So it clearly says what is the conviction rate and what are the situation that exists, what are the barriers, how the Dalit women are facing, and what is the thing. So what should be the thing? This is the situation which it speaks about. Come as an organization, as a Dalit women, I don't want to say only the situation, but also there are some recommendations and the demands that we as a Dalit women, as a Dalit women organization, definitely, no doubt, there are various laws. When we go to international platform, wherever we share our concerns, people used to say, you have n number of laws. For each and everything you have a law. But our concerns is on implementation of the law. We have, it's very good. I'm very proud. When I see the other countries, I'm proud that we have so much of legal mechanisms to address the issues. But why does not it been addressing? Why there has been increasing? We clearly says, government record clearly says, every year constantly violence against Dalit women are increasing. And it clearly says, then what is the thing that we have to do? We have SC/ST Act in the year 1989. Then we have got into the amendment 2015, SC/ST Amendment Act. Again, in the year 2016, they said that SC/ST Act has been misused because the conviction rate are less. They are not ready to look into the what are the factors, what made the conviction rate less. When you see this Hathras case, what kind of pressure on the victim's family? Just 4 members in that Hathras we visited, we saw only 4 families are residing in that village who are from Dalit community, Valmiki community. Rest are dominant caste people. So what kind of pressure people will be handling? And what is the time? This is pendency rate. If you see 88% of the cases are pending. Prolonged pendency, prolonged trial. So what as a person who are residing in that village and depending, who doesn't have a land, who's depending on the dominant caste person for that everything, day-to-day life, livelihood, how do you expect them to see the prolonged trial? So these are some of the questions we have to keep it in our mind when we are looking into the various aspects. We know they are socially, economically, educationally backward people. And with this, they are having a guts and registering the cases to file against this kind of fight against the atrocities. The system has to support them in such a way, and they have to enhance the people in order to stop this kind of atrocity and untouchability if they want to definitely ban from the country. So keeping these things, we would like to say the SC/ST Act, which not only speak about the when the atrocity happens, it not only speak about the things, it also speaks about the prevention mechanism. It also very clearly says it's a Prevention of Atrocities Act. What are the mechanism to be adopted? The atrocity prone district has to be marked. It has to be given more attention. So many things are there, but what is this? The system is not functioning. And I would also say the data, whatever I presented, it is related to sexual violences data. The government doesn't keep any record of murder of Dalit women. There is no segregated data. We don't know how many Dalit women are murdered. It speaks about assault, physical assault. It speaks about insult. It speaks about rape. Even there is no segregated data for gang rape. As we are seeing, the gang rape has been increased, and following the gang rape, murder. So such a heinous things are happening, but there is nothing to be recorded saying these are the things, offenses. So if you see, I can't say that this many 45% of the increase from 2014 to 19, it is only on sexual and physical violence, nothing on more on acid attack or procuration. These trafficking, human trafficking, where all offenses are under IPC, but there are only specific offenses under SC/ST Act has been maintained in this data by the government. So these also we have to work on the disaggregated data in order to get a clear picture of what are the violence the women are facing, in order to do advocacy. It is not to just to make it. We want to do advocacy to stop some of the things. So we need disaggregated data. That is also one of the priority we would like to see. And the effective implementation of the SC/ST Act, we have the Act 1518 Amendment Act. Kindly, we demand that it has to be implemented properly to ensure justice. And adequate budget allocation. As we also have Act, it is not sufficient. We should have a budgetary mandatory provision in order to implement the Act, to establish special courts. It's not only just saying on the paper, we should establish special courts. There are no special courts much in so many districts. That's why the pendency rates are more. 88% of the cases are pending. So we also demand the adequate budget should be provided in order to implement the schemes and other things for the Dalits. And we would also say the facilitate engagement between the Ministry of Social Justice Empowerment and Women and Child Development. We can't see the Ministry of Social Justice Empowerment as an isolation, though they are working for Dalit and other things. But we should, when we consider Dalit women, there should be a facilitate an engagement between Ministry of Social Justice and Women and Child Development, so that it addresses all kinds of issues related to Dalit women. And we would also say that reservation for Dalit women in the state and assembly, in the parliament, is very important. It's one of the important things. We all know what is the situation. At least we have to raise some of the issues. So we also demand that. And also we say that UN Human Rights Council, it's very important. As we all know, UN Principle and Guidelines, International Conference on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Based on Work and Descent. These are some of the conventions that we are looking for to address various discrimination, because we are seeing this, it's not only an Indian problem. It's a Pakistan problem, it's a Bangladesh problem, it's an Asia issue, Dalit issues are Asian issues. And when you see the South Africa and Africans people, they are also based on their occupation, they have been discriminated. They also have been discriminated based on work and descent. So these are the things that we are looking. So finally, I would like to say it's a thing to the women, mainly the feminist movement of India. I would like to say we have to consider Dalit women issues. We can't isolate it. If it is, we are speaking, feminism should be intersectional until it has been addressed in a larger space. Because we can't dismantle patriarchy until we address the caste system, because those are the roots. Caste, religion are the roots for the existing patriarchy. So keeping this, feminism should be intersectional by addressing issues of each and every woman of this country. By saying this, Jai Bhim, thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation, actually. So any questions? Do you have questions to the speakers? Please.
You can type the questions in the chat. I was actually, if I can sort of set the ball rolling and abuse my privilege of having the mic on. I was looking at that slide where you listed the NCRB slide, and the states that have the most atrocities. It's a question we ask when we see gender violence numbers. When we see higher reporting, we wonder if it's that the numbers are greater because people are reporting more and registering more cases, or that there is something peculiar about the structure and culture of those regions. I think can you
Yes.
throw some light on that?
Sure, thank you. As we all know, the thing, there are ranking based on Dalit atrocities, like UP, Bihar, Rajasthan. It comes in that when we see as a holistically as atrocities states. But when we see as a Dalit women state, we are unable to see Bihar even within the top 10 states. Though we know witch hunting is practiced, discrimination is practiced very rampant, we had surprise how Bihar didn't come within the top 10 of this, because it's within the second rank when we see as a Dalit atrocities states. Then when we having an interaction with our field team and other experiences shows, whenever a Dalit woman goes to register the case, the police doesn't consider her until she has any issue with one of her family member who is a male person, like a mother along with the son. If she is going, they have beaten me as well as my son, they won't consider you. Okay, you tell your son's name, they will register the case. So this clearly says it's based on government record, but how the government record comes, it is on the implementation, registration of the cases.
Mm-hmm.
It is also, we can see the Bihar. That's why when we go to the field, we can see so many women has been abused, assaulted, beaten, physical. But why the government data doesn't speak? Because the police doesn't consider them as a human being. So this is one of the things that we have seen. And also, definitely the assertion is also increasing. There is no doubt. At least people are ready to register in FIR. Awareness has been increasing, and the SC/ST Act, everybody knows little information about it. So at least, and the activist human rights defenders also plays a critical role. Even during the COVID, more than 26% of the cases where we are working are registered through our organization, All India Dalit Mahila Adhikar Manch, on various aspects, protest or reaching to the officers, again going to the higher officers, accompanying the victims. So that even today, if you see the presence of human rights activists and Dalit activists is very important even for registering the cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also one of the critical area where we are saying that's promoting the youth activists, so that an awareness is built, and whenever any atrocity happens, they can take along the people along with them to register the cases. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. Assertion is also increasing. Promoting the Dalit human rights defenders is also part of it, where we can see the cases registration are more on the one side, and the other side, due to assertion, violence is also increasing. That is also we know. Even the honor killing, Tamil Nadu is becoming one of the topmost state. If we speak up without honor killing, without speaking about Tamil Nadu, we can't end the things, because we all know how Kaushal, Shankar, and from that there are so many other incidences also. Though Ambedkar said intersectional intermarriage is one of the solution, but now for that also there are various assertiveness and other things happening. But violence, that is also become one of the reason for the violence. So these are the things. So it depends upon state to state, and also the political Dalit movement. That is also, it's one of the thing. I would like to say Tamil Nadu is not in the top 10 list. Tamil Nadu is not in the top 10. Maharashtra is there, Rajasthan is there, Andhra is there, Telangana is there, Karnataka is there, Haryana is there, Haryana is there, Orissa is there. So these are the top 10 list, where the atrocities are more. But when we are seeing this kind of the thing, that Tamil Nadu is not, we can say like because of the political movement or the awareness created by various people. So that is also, it plays a critical role when we see on various states. That is my experience.
Swarna, I want to say something.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can go ahead. Ma'am, ma'am, do you want to say something, Dr.
Yeah,
Ruth, ma'am?
yeah. I think the question that, Swarna had asked, that, I think the question is the Dalit men and girls in the recent, past that we study and recorded in NCRB. Actually, NCRB shows not to the total. Many of the cases doesn't get, first of all, registered. It has been stopped at the police station level itself, because you have these, panchayats, local panchayats, settle many matters there itself. The cut panchayats, okay? I think we need to understand there's a growing, the target of sexual brutality by the upper caste men who are in power. Yeah, I think wherever the upper caste men are ruling, there the brutality has, exceeded. So take the case of, the Athras case, like, Abhirami had mentioned. This does not stand in isolation. The cases are not in isolation. Especially in the state of UP, the dubious record of the rape and brutal murders of Dalit and Muslim women. Yeah, and, we can ask question, who says in India, the women are worshipped, you see? Yeah. So these brutal atrocities of the marginalized women continue relenting frequency with no justice in sight. So the connivance of the powerful men and the missionaries doesn't allow, either the cases to come up, or it will, kind of, close down in the middle. And, there are no evidences. There's a long procedures, like you have to wait and wait. And, the SC/ST Atrocity Act gives you a lot of provision where people can fight, but they have no support. So even in the Athras case, where Thakurs are in larger number, and there are few Brahmins over there, and, when the scavenger families, like, the in the Valmikis, in Athras, like they are a kind of a minuscule minority in comparison with, the 3 or 4 families of, these Valmikis. I think this is one of the, very strong case where the Dalit people in the big villages, they are a minuscule minority. Say they know either they have weapon, or, support, or, political, support is there for them. I think these are the reasons where in the states, like, the Rajasthan. Oh, Rajasthan is famous for, rape of Dalit women. Like, I've been working there, and I know hundreds and hundreds cases, in public hearing we have heard, and we have taken up cases in the princely states, where, they think that justice will, prevail in this kingly and princely states. I mean, there the atrocities are more. Of course, in Andhra Pradesh and, Bihar. Bihar used to have a Savarna army. I need to bring this. That is why Bhagavati had said that in one of the discussions, that, the rape against, Dalit women is, war against those communities. It's a war against, it's a caste war against the communities. So nothing, of Dalit women attack. It's not in isolation. It's not an isolated issue. It's a kind of, very pre-planned attack that Savarna armies, still that all continue. In Bihar, Savarna army, it is called Savarna army. So you have armies, apart from the government as his own army. Like, the caste armies are there, Savarna armies to attack people. So endlessly, by being against them, perpetuating violence against them is to really to silence them, silence those community. And it's a challenge to men in the community. Yeah, you are women, we have a right to rape, that kind of a challenge. So the men are, really, really shameful, feel guilty about it, not able to protect. And, therefore, in many places, like, the Dalit from the outside, we give a lot of support. Even, the fact finding, the group went, that village is so isolated. People are so isolated. There are more police standing not to protect the people, in order to protect the victim, protect the perpetrators. I think this is a big irony in which justice is being, mooted in this country. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful reply. And we have two more questions here in the chat. One is by Ammu Joseph. Could you comment on the relationship between aggressive right-wing politics, which has been on the ascendant over the past several years, and violence or atrocities against Dalit in general and Dalit women in particular? So over to you, Abhirami.
Aggressive? Can you repeat it? Aggressive?
Right-wing politics.
Right-wing politics, yeah. So
aggressive
right-wing politics and violence against violence or atrocities against Dalit in general and Dalit women in particular.
Yeah. The data which it shows, it clearly says it's a right wing when it came to the power. From 14, the 19, it's a period of the existing government. We can see the rate of increasing. It's really we can see, because they looks Dalit as the supporters when they take up the other religious things. Like there was some instances where the Muslims have been attacked on various aspects. So they are considering Dalits as Hindus. So whenever there is on communal violence or some other things, they consider Dalits as Hindus and they have taken into part of it. But when within the caste system, when it comes against us Hinduism within among that, still Dalits are not allowed to enter temple, as we all know in most of the states, and it has been increasing in the last few years. This is what the government data, NCRB also says, the violences have been increasing both on men as well as the Dalit women. So what is the, there is a thing. We can see that the link, if even for the temple, the recent Ram temple, what is the thing that they are contributing? Even I would like to say, because of the existing, this is some of my practical experiences, okay, nothing to be done. We have when this existing government or the RSS wing came to power, most of the thing has been, in one way or other, it has been privatized. It may be a contract laborers or it may be a construction work. And these kind of things has been given to their own communities or dominant caste people. Where we know most of the Dalits are contract laborers and other kind of things, they didn't get an opportunity of their contract when these things came into the power. So it is not only the atrocities, but also the economic growth of this community has been hampered by some of this things. So we can see this as one of the things. It's not only on physical violence, but also on economical part. There has been increased discrimination, and the caste played a critical role in order to get the other kind of employment too. So this is some of the things. Maybe Ruth ma'am can also add her things.
I think, the atrocities against Dalit and the Muslims in this country, in the growing, Hindutva regime, I would say that, it's really an ideological battle. It's not only a battle against a group of people, it's an ideological battle. In order to control a community, you better control women, Their purity is so important, the purity of, caste is very important. This really forms the core of, you know, purity and pollution theory in, I think, in the Hindutva context. When it comes to women, hey, you better shut up, all of you. Like, you know, be in your place. Don't talk more. Like, you know, you have to be controlled. You have to be controlled, you know, by men. And like, you know, in somebody in Tamil Nadu, I think, you know, the discussion is Thuimai Vadam, you know, it's a purity theory has to really percolate. So purity of caste, therefore you have to keep the women, you know, really without any blemishness. So the caste theory and the you know, theory of, you know, the gender is so, you know, correlating with each other. It is actually, you know, the patriarchal as well as, you know, the caste hierarchy is two sides of the coin. Now, we used to describe this, you know, as an ideological basis for women's oppression in general and women's oppression of the marginalized community. So today that, you know, if you see women, that women do not have any rights over her body, rights over herself. So if your husband dies, you have to die along with your husband, the old sati. So in a sense, by controlling women's, you know, women's purity, you know, the generation, the genealogy must be also protected by purity of caste, purity of blood. I think, you know, these are all, we can, you know, talk about it. People have written about it. But I'm saying that today, in order to oppose women's subjugation, caste subjugation, and the subjugation of the religious minorities, I think, you know, the struggle are so much similar. That is why that, you know, I said that we need to come together in order to really, you know, to protest against the male domination, which is patriarchal. And also, like, you know, if we want a democratic governance must rule us, like, you know, the women have to rise. Women have to rise, and women have to rise because, you know, we have to rise against even, you know, male domination. I think Sulochana, she was one of the former MLAs during the independent period. She was also an MLA in the Constituent Assembly. Sulochana Shivaraman, I think her name is. And, you know, she said that if women have to be, ஆணாதிக்க விடுதலையே, ஆண் ஆதிக்க விடுதலையே, பெண், you know, பெண்ணின் விடுதலை, she's saying that. Whenever we see that, you know, the men have to be free from, you know, patriarchal control of us, you know, and that is the day that women will really arise. I think, you know, Priyanka in her, you know, many talks, she said that annihilation of caste is so much interlinked with annihilation of patriarchy. So I think these are very much, you know, vibrant today in the thoughts of the Hindutva forces. You have to, you know, control women. You have to keep their purity very, very strong. By keeping a purity, you will have, you know, the offsprings will be, you know, pure. There is no, you know, that is why today we said, we see love jihad. Like, you know, nobody can intermarriage. I mean, the solution was overcoming caste discrimination. Overcoming caste is also the government itself promote intercaste marriages. Now love jihad has come. That program has become, that popular program has become null and void, you see. So you see this, and, you know, that purity in Tamil, தூய்மை வாதம், தூய்மை வாதமே பெண் ஒடுக்குமுறைக்கு சிறந்த காரணம் என்று சொல்லுகின்றார்கள். ஆகினால் தான் பெண்கள் கிளர்ந்து எழ வேண்டும். சும்மா வாயை மூடிக்கிட்டு காஸ்ட் கிளாஸ், you know, oppression பேசுறது இல்ல. We must arise. That is why Dr. Ambedkar is so important in our midst. Educate, agitate, and organize. Oh, you're fine, I am fine, you're fine, you're okay, I am okay. Like, you know, that kind of theories and all that. So I think that, you know, we have entered into a great era. The caste and the patriarchy has entered into a great era of, you know, legitimizing Hindutva. Yeah, okay, on the other side. I think we must rise. So Amu Joseph had asked this question: aggressive right-wing politics and violence against women in general, violence against women in particular Dalit women is so rampant today. Laws cannot delimit them. So I think rising of political consciousness, political raising is so important, not only for Dalit women, for all women. I don't know, Amu is satisfied with that answer.
No,
Is that Amu Joseph?
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Abhirami, for the reply. And we have another question. How are you seeing state Tamil Nadu comparing with other states regarding violence against Dalit women?
Yeah.
I think the Tamil Nadu women will tell us. And we are all, located far away from you. Yeah, but only the statistics tell us what's happening. Yeah.
When compared to, I would proudly say the patriarchal values are very less in Tamil Nadu.
No. I will not agree with you, Abhirami. I will not agree with you. I will not agree with you, of course. Like there is patriarchal values are increasing everywhere. The patriarchal control has not decreased at all.
North India, we can see even today. If you go, which is very closer to Delhi.
No, you may say, yes, you may say the women in Tamil Nadu, because of the legitimacy of Periyar thoughts and of Ambedkarite thought and of the decay movements, I think there's a growing consciousness in women. We can say that, but I don't think that patriarchal control is completely out from the socio-economic and political lives of the people in Tamil Nadu. I will not say that. You still have superstitions. You still have superstition. You still have dowry. You still have child marriages. You still have, these are all the result of keeping women under patriarchal control as well as caste control. I don't know whether Swarna would agree with me. Yeah, but I think patriarchal values under control, I will not say that. The movement for voicing out is more in the South region, and of course, like even in Kerala, it is more. I would say that because of the movements, the various Dalit movements there, Periyar thoughts have made women to think, I think that's very important.
That's true. That is not only that, but also the cultural practice also to some extent. The movement, from where we have come from, when we see even today the Kap Panchayat, or when we give the trainings to the Dalit women of the states of Haryana or Rajasthan, still they are covering the faces and sitting in that training, even whatever the empowerment we give, because it clearly says, as per there is no much political awareness or any movement. Even if it is Haryana, if you see, there is no even the NGOs, organization to give awareness on human rights.
I will agree with you. I agree with you, Jyoti, Abhirami. The Aryan aggression was more in the north regions than the Dravidian ruled states. I think that is to a certain extent. It's not completely off.
Thank you. So that is also one of the things where we see the states where we can see there is no political representation. Even we can say most, even in the Panchayat Raj election, still we can call it as a Sarpanch Pati. Matlab, the women may be a sarpanch, but the husband is ruling the thing. So we call the husband as a sarpanch pati. So these are some of the things which we can see a very thing which it is difficult for the women to take their power. Even it is on education level. If you see we can see there are higher education level in Tamil Nadu, Kerala and other things compared to the North India, even the higher education rate of women where they are from. So there are various things, even from the movement basis as well as the event that we are seeing on day-to-day basis. But atrocity levels are there. It is no doubt violence against women, even it is a domestic violence or a caste-based violence, it's rampant everywhere. But the number of cases, incidences, when we see, that is more on the north because of various reasons, that there is no political awareness, there is no movement. When we see, there is no definitely there is no movement in Haryana or what are the other Rajasthan, there are not that kind of movement we can able to see. So these are the various things where we can see a differences definitely between south and north. It clearly indicates. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Ruth, ma'am, you can.
Thank you, Abhirami, for the reply. Ma'am, do you want to say anything? Ruth, ma'am? Do you want to say about this? I think she's done with that. Okay, so anybody having any questions? Okay, somebody, Nadasha Singh, she sent a comment. Thank you, Ruth ma'am and Abhirami ma'am, for such a compelling talk. My question is related to the place of international framework in addressing issue of violence against Dalit and women and girls. Could you kindly shed some light on the impact international mechanism has made in addressing the issues you outlined in lecture today?
Yeah, definitely there are voices not only from the movement of India but also international. There are various mechanisms. There are CEDA, CERT, every Human Rights Council, UPR, there are several mechanisms, and also they have given a lot of recommendations. Maybe Ruth ma'am will say, because she has an experience of handling that. But even in our report, the status report that we released, we all consolidated the various recommendations that the UN bodies has given. They have given such a recommendation like the human rights education for the children on all bases, so that it brings equality and justice. And training to the officials to sensitize them. There are high valued recommendations, but again, when we see, when some of the governments, even the Indian government, accept some of the recommendation, even unable to accept most of the things. So even accepting the things, first you have to accept, then only you can implement. When you're not ready to accept the things, whatever the mechanism is there, it is an external pressure group. Whatever the things has to happen, it has to happen within India. So this is how we are looking in it, but there are large number of international bodies supporting the issues related to Dalit and Dalit women. There have been recommendations which has been wide, but some of the recommendations only India has accepted, and others is, even though they are saying we have law, we have this, we have that, but what is actually the ground reality, we all know. Yes, thank you. Ruth ma'am.
Yeah. I was just thinking to say this to you. There are basic principles behind women's subjugation in our societies. You know, the great Varnashram. Varnashram doesn't talk about equality. Varnashram only talk about, you know, hierarchy of caste. So in the hierarchy of caste, so there are no human beings who are equal. You have to be an unequal to another person. This is Varnashram. That is why, you know, all of us read in a general sociology also, the castes are divided, you know, into an hierarchical form. Even a child, you know, who goes and study little bit of, you know, social science, they would be able to write that Brahmins, Vaishyas, Kshatras, you know, and Shudras. And under that is untouchables. So the Varnashram theory is so embedded in us, which talks about inequality. Yeah. I think, that we need to keep in mind while we are discussing caste and gender. Then the second point, without, abolishing Varnashram theory, like people may not accept this, why Ruth is saying all this. I mean, it is a fact. It is man created. It is not God created. Even if God created, it is wrong. So I'm saying that our constitution in contrast says that we are equal. The preamble of the constitution says that, the preamble talks about the discrimination on the basis of caste, class, gender, religion, and sex. Like, it should not be there. Social justice, fraternity must rule. So I think this Varnashram theory is a dangerous theory for women's subjugation in our country. I think we should keep it in mind. Then the second one is the culture of caste. The culture of caste so ingrained in our mind, in our heart, in our soul, in our blood. The culture of caste, like, in many ways, the way we talk, the way we eat, the way that we behave, it shows that, oh, she is ours, or he is ours, she or he is ours. The others are strangers. So therefore, the mentality of keeping other people and otherness is a very important, aspect of, caste. And, also gender. I think, feminist movement very strongly should discuss this and think about it. Yeah. I mean, women have, taken caste question very, very lightly. And if you want me to talk more on that, I would say that the sexuality of women, the fertility of women has been controlled by caste and gender. Today, we cannot marry outside the caste. It is controlled. I already said that. Like, we got to be pure. The pure blood must be retained. What is pure blood? What is not pure blood? Blood are, divided into A plus, B plus, O plus, and all that stuff. What is pure blood? So I think that the theory, the irrational theories today that keep women, keep the marginalized people under somebody. So I think, to me, it legitimizes my thinking that in our society, women have to be free. Women have to enjoy freedom. I think we must oppose Varnashram on one side, and then of the culture of caste on the other side. It's so ingrained in our mind, ingrained in our way of life. I mean, Hinduism is a way of life. The way of life is treating another, it's not shown very, very outwardly, but it's so much inside. How do we break this? Can we transcend? You are born in different communities, okay. Can we transcend this? Only by transcending, in our society, there will be equality, gender equality. There will be equality among the sexes, caste, classes. I think it's very important, to understand the root causes of the problem. You can talk about caste and gender as if it's intersectional and all that we are talking about. Sometimes, it's too much to talk about all that. But it's in everyday practical life, like, I know many stories. Like, the neighbor of mine, one day asking me, Ruth, give me a tumbler, give me a tumbler. I said, why? You are, asking me from my house. She said, I want this to be utilized by my, by another, the worker in my house. That tumbler I saw, it was kept in one corner near a well. I said that, look at that. Look at that mentality. Yeah, and I am more educated. I come from a Christian family, educated family. Look at this woman, that tumbler she cannot buy. She has to take it from my family. Yeah. And I first gave it to her. And then I thought that, look at this. Even providing a tumbler to a family. I work with Domestic Workers Union. The domestic workers in many houses, are not allowed to enter into the kitchen. It's a purity theory. They will clean up, they will wash, they will do everything. But into the kitchen where you kept, the God, you cannot enter in. So in everyday's life, that we practice this, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. How are we going to overcome this superstition? Yeah, cleanliness is necessary. But, the purity theory is wrong. Cleanliness is opposed to purity theory. I think, we must oppose it as women, as Dalit women, as, women of the marginalized community, of women who come from a privileged caste. I think it's a very big question. I think we should go today, not only just learning something on caste and gender, but what is it in our practice? Yeah, what is the theory? What is in practice? We must, overcome and transcend these differences. Then only you will be an extraordinary woman, not an ordinary stereotyped woman. The caste and gender hierarchy make you a stereotyped women to be under the control of caste and men dominance. How are we going to oppose it in our daily practical life? Only you have this chintana in your mind, a progressive thinking in your mind. You can overcome. We are all together. We are all same. For me, all the women are same. We look same. Because we come from a different social locations, that it makes our life difference. How do we overcome these differences? It's a major question before all of us who are attending the conference on caste and gender. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And there are some comments over here. Ammu Joseph, she said, thanks Abhirami and Ruth for your responses to my question. And Sarat Satya said, thank you so much, Abhirami ma'am and Dr. Ruth. And Archana Kumari, she said, thank you very much, Abhirami and Ruth ma'am, for enlightening us on such an important issue. Thanks for organizing this thought-provoking lecture. And Shanti Ramesh said, thanks, Abhirami ma'am and Ruth ma'am. So with that note, I also thank you so much, both of you. So that's such a thought-provoking and enrich discussion and the lecture and also the discussion. So we are so privileged to have you both here, and thank you so much for your time and efforts and sharing your thoughts over here. Thank you, Ruth ma'am and Abhirami. Thank you so much.
Whoever